Everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be the Defenders cheat sheet. Today's video is going to be mostly focused on some of the great picks and the best picks in FPL within the defender position. I just find it very hard to sort of argue for some differentials early on and also some avoid options. Ultimately, actually, some of the best options are even players from the same team at the same price point, and you might just be debating between, let's say, a Chilwell or James or a Stones and a Diaz. And I think it is worth talking about these picks more so than, let's say, going a little bit outside the box. With the keepers, I think there's a bit more debate because keepers get save points, weaker quality defenses get to benefit more. But with the defenders, I think you just really have to trust in things like expected clean sheets, the quality defenses that we saw last season, quality of defense that we saw in the championship. As far as the 4.0 ones, of course, you're just getting access to the championship players. I would just go for Baldock because he doesn't have a blank fixture. That's the key thing here. Bayer is the one who has a blank, unfortunately, because he has this fixture versus Luton Town that was suspended. And Baldock, of course, is also the right wing back for the Sheffield United team, where you're going to benefit from at least potentially expected assists per 90 over some of the more boring players like a Bell that we recently saw. And of course, you've got Kabore, who have actually neglected on the sheet, but I do think Luton Town are expected to be the worst defense outside of Sheffield United. And because Sheffield United don't have a blank, I'd much rather go with Baldock in the meantime. Because when you take a short-term view to FPL and you look at this 4.0 bench as just depth for your team, you don't really want a blank. And if you do have a blank, you want to make sure that their defense is at least slightly better. And so that's the situation where you have Bayer coming in as second. At 4.5, this is where you have some great players and finally some dilemmas really for our FPL teams. I'm personally someone who isn't going to be picking a 4.0 player, and that's just my opinion. Some people will go for 4.0, particularly to, let's say, fund someone like Salah, and I understand that sentiment. I understand also the want to build a draft with Salah. But for me, I prefer a slightly more well-rounded draft, and I think 4.5 defenders give you this. I was making the case that, getting access to a Newcastle defender who's absolutely nailed the second best defense last season is a little bit ridiculous. And this is the landscape of FPL, where you have a huge gulf, effectively, of getting someone like a Botman from a second place defense versus a championship sort of promotion defense. And that's a huge gulf, in my opinion, for that 0.5 price point. Anyways, I've actually changed my mind in terms of whether Botman is actually the best defender or even Henry. I've actually moved Colwill up to number 1. And the reason for that is because he signed a new contract, and also because ultimately when I look at these Chelsea fixtures, they're still really good. And I don't think Badiashile will actually come back until, let's say, game week 5, game week 6, potentially even after the international break. So if you can actually manage to get Colwill for game weeks 2 to, let's say, 5, his job is really done, because you've got inordinately good fixtures for what should be a nailed left center back. Disasi, of course, has signed for Chelsea, but I think he's going to be a right center back, someone who's competing with Thiago Silva in the meantime. And Colwill, of course, has really good underlying stats too as a center back. And if we expect Chelsea to grow as a team and to actually develop and not be a 10th place defense under Pochettino, then I think Colwill's just an excellent pick. As far as Henry, I think he's someone where you can say Brentford have put up a relatively good body of work when it comes to defense. Fixtures are solid, they're good. Covers also game week 4, which is a big gap. And I do like Henry just in terms of how nailed he is, how he's usually going to be a 90-minute player, no risks there, and still a fullback. So a huge benefit there with Rico Henry. As far as Botman, I still love him. I know a lot of people are suggesting the idea that he could drop in price. So you could go for Burn, but keep in mind, of course, that they've also signed Livramento. Maybe he can get some minutes at the left back position. They, of course, have Dume as well, who could play. But I mean, Botman, for me, is still the best pick because we know he's nailed, less chances of getting rotated, maybe slightly more goal threat. It's very, very slim, actually, and Botman isn't particularly great, even though he's huge as a human being. So ultimately, you're just getting access to Newcastle defense, and you should just be happy there, because from game week 5 onwards, if you're, let's say, not planning a very intricate early wild card, then Botman's going to have incredible value for your draft. Tarkowski is an interesting one, where I think I probably was looking a little bit more short term with the Everton defense when I was looking at game weeks 1 to 6, but 7 and 8 are such great fixtures where if you look a little bit longer term, Tarkowski is actually a really good pick. And he has been rumored to have a knock, so that's sort of the one concern for game week 1, but I think he's going to play. It seems like Sean Dyche says he's fine, so Tarkowski is actually a very interesting pick, and of course the sort of main set piece threat, especially now that Mina's gone. So I do like Tarkowski here in this position. We do expect Everton to improve a bit, but not so drastically, and that is, I suppose, the reservation I have. I would say Everton are a team where they weren't a particularly good defense last season. Yes, they have a good defensive manager, but they have better fixtures than someone like Crystal Palace, which is where that sort of balance it needs to be met as well. And Tarkowski has a little bit more goal threat than some of the Crystal Palace defenders. As far as cash, I think he's an interesting punt where if you actually look at a rotation between Cash and Botman, it's actually very good. And it kind of goes back to, for example, Tarkowski as well, who rotates quite well with, let's say, an Estupinian. So that's an option as well. Cash is someone who had horrific underlying stats last season, but I do think whilst Moreno is actually working towards full fitness, he is a very good punt. If you want to go for a little bit of a safer pick, you can definitely go for Konsa or Mings. I think Cash is going to be someone who's going to be bombarding early on, and we'll probably see something like left back Mings, because we saw a little bit of left back Pau Torres and it wasn't particularly good. We'll probably see, amalgamation of, let's say, Konsa, Mings, and also Pau Torres, and sometimes we'll see maybe Dean and Cash. But I think just based on preseason so far that Cash has sort of stolen that position for himself, and he'll probably get a head start in terms of actually being that sort of bombarding fullback at the start of the season. So I do like the punt on Cash, so to speak. Udogie is actually the most interesting one, because obviously we've been looking at this Spurs team as a team who have racked up crazy amounts of shots. Udogie is a very attacking player. He's actually been nailed effectively in the preseason, with exception to the first game that Reguilon played. And as a result, I think Udogie is great. Look at the underlying stats. 0.1 XG per 90, 0.14 XA per 90. He's like the first defender within this class where you can say he could really rise above the rest. And he very much is sort of like Pedro Porro in that sense. But the issue with Pedro Porro and why he's in a void is because, unfortunately, Udogie exists. And second of all, Emerson could very much take that position. And what we see as well in modern football is not necessarily two attacking fullbacks, but usually a sort of hybrid blend of the two. And maybe Udogie is going to get that left back position, whilst someone like Emerson is a bit more defensive in the right back position. As far as the 5.0 players, once again, you have a lot of depth here, and a lot of us are going to be starting with two of the players within this price bracket, and that's going to be Estupinian and Gabriel. However, I think it's time to probably just admit that Saliba is on the level. Yes, Gabriel had insane XG per 90, led the league in terms of defenders from that. You also have someone like Anel Ahmedhodzic as well, who is very, very good at that in terms of set pieces. I do think Saliba's stats are a little bit off. They're quite low, but he was also attacking on set pieces. And I think, if I remember actually last season, early on, Saliba wasn't attacking set pieces, particularly in corners. And then later on, he actually found himself into more increasingly aggressive positions. He did score, of course, in open play as well with his feet, which is insane. But ultimately, Saliba might actually just be an even more nailed center back under Arteta, as long as he's fully fit. So that's sort of the slight perk that Saliba has, but I think I'd probably still start the season with Gabriel just because he's a better set piece threat. As far as Martinez, this is, of course, the United's Martinez. He's not really a great goal threat, but actually access to the United defense at 5.0 is quite nice, particularly if you, let's say, don't want to go with Onana as your goalkeeper. However, the reason why he's not a great option for me, or a best option rather, is simply because I'd much rather go with Onana, since Martinez has no goal threat whatsoever. I do actually like United's fixtures, and I think long term, actually, they're slightly better than Arsenal. But actually, when you're looking at the fact that, let's say, there's some rotation possibilities with Ramsdale and Raya now, there's no real reason to, for example, look at an Arsenal goalkeeper. Instead, you'd probably be looking at an Arsenal defender. Vice versa, though, you'd probably be looking at Onana as well as your keeper if you want to do that. Schar's the one defender here alongside Trippier who are differentials that I would still think about. I can understand if you, let's say, wanted to pass by Botman and maybe you wanted to be a little bit more intricate, a little bit more long-term with your thinking, you can go with Schar, because actually look at the XG per 90. Actually, he's got better XG per 90 than Gabriel, so I misspoke earlier. But he is someone who has been fantastic at attacking set pieces, even at his sort of height and his frame. He takes a lot of shots, more so than any of the other center backs that we actually have in the Premier League. And on top of that, of course, you can see very, very good with expected assists per 92 for the center back. So quite inordinately good as an option. Also plays for a second top tier defense. I think he's just an option when you think about Game Week 5 onwards. I would not think about Schar for Game Week 1 personally. As far as the 5.5 picks, these are all fantastic options. In my opinion, I've actually ranked them in the way that I like. Stones is actually someone who's sort of fallen down the pecking order because I'm a little bit scared with the option to rotate with Guardiola, and maybe also Stones being someone who has historically been managed in the past, where you'd probably say Ruben Dias is still the most nailed player within this team. Some people will also argue that Stones is of course the much better ball playing center back, and that's why of course you've seen him move into the midfield at times. I think that's true. And when you look at, let's say, his ability to play in the midfield, that might also increase his expected goal involvement. However, we also saw in the Community Shield that he didn't necessarily play in the midfield position. So we might see something different with Kovacic starting the season. So that's a slight point of concern with Stones, where if I, for example, saw him in the Community Shield and he was once again in the midfield, I probably would actually rank him over Ruben Dias for now. As far as Chilwell, I think he's the clear attacking option, just because maybe I have a little bit of a recency bias with James suffering so many injuries. I know Chilwell has suffered his fair share of long-term injuries as well, but it feels like James has struggled to sort of get match fit consistently, whereas Chilwell has sort of been one long injury and then he's actually fit for a decent run of games and then he gets injured again. So I may be likely to go with Chilwell for now. As far as Shaw, though, you're looking at a player who's pretty much absolutely nailed for United. Contrasting to some of these players here, he'll probably never be rotated or subbed off in some games. I think that that's sort of what Ten Hag sees of him. He doesn't really need to be subbed off unless he has an injury. So that's sort of a huge plus when we think about, more benefits to, let's say, getting attacking returns by just simply having more minutes. And I think United's fixtures are very, very good. In fact, they sort of overlap quite nicely with Arsenal's fixtures, where if you look at these fixtures where you've got Wolves and Nottingham Forest in game weeks 1 and 3, Arsenal also have game weeks 1 and 3 good games at home, Nottingham Forest and Fulham respectively. You could arguably see a landscape where you're rotating, let's say, between a Chelsea defender and an Arsenal or United defender. And maybe you have to make a pick between the Arsenal and United defender as well, just to sort of balance out the rotation between each game week. At the same time, someone like Ruben Dias is fantastic because he sort of papers over the cracks really, really well. Doesn't have any key bad fixtures because fortunately, even some of the bad fixtures like Newcastle are at home, where unfortunately City are indomitable at this point in time. Actually, and sorry, going back to James, really, I just wanted to add a point where there could be a small world where he could be the penalty taker for this Chelsea team. I know a lot of people are holding out for this dream, and it might just be a dream because Nico Jackson could still take penalties, even though he hasn't had really a penalty taking record in the past. But that's sort of the landscape of FPL, right? Where you don't really have any trusted penalty takers within this Chelsea team. There could be a small chance or a sliver of a chance that James could be the penalty taker. He also has really, really good underlying stats. When you compare it to some of the peers here, of course, incredible expected assists per 90 outside of the sort of true premium bracket, which is going to be Trippier and Alexander-Arnold. So that's a huge plus to owning Reece James. And of course, we've seen his sort of goal scoring heroics in the past. Very good finisher. But that's the one concern, right, with James. It's always going to be in the back of your head, how long is it going to take for him to get injured again? And some managers might be braver than myself and might actually go with the two of them. I'd probably just be minded to go with Chilwell for now, but that's sort of my thoughts on James. As far as the true premium players, I've actually docked Alexander-Arnold from being a best option. And I just simply think he is a little bit too expensive. I think also when we look at the preseason, his role hasn't been as exciting as actually when he was playing that sort of hybrid role close to the end of the season. Now with some of the new midfielders, you're clearly seeing that they don't really need him to be so creative and so advanced at times. And that's also just going to hurt Alexander-Arnold. At the same time, Liverpool's defense don't seem to be any better. And their defense really truly did fall off last season. We can see that not even just in terms of the actual goals conceded, because actually Alisson had a historic year when it came to shot stopping. But Liverpool were very, very poor, conceded a lot of XG last season, so much so that, it's such a drastic fall from the past that even a lot of gambling and betting houses struggled to sort of react to how poorly Liverpool became as a defense. As far as Trippier, though, you are still looking at someone who I think is incredibly valued. At Game Week 5, I'm definitely going to find a solution towards going for Trippier. You can see the expected assists per 90 are crazy high. He's still going to be on set pieces. Yes, he might have a little bit of rotation threat with Livramento. Highly doubt that he'll be missing some of the early Premier League games, though. And we can just wait and see, right? We can just wait and see with what happens with Trippier and Livramento, potentially even some of the young talent that they have that they've been playing the preseason, some of the fullback positions and what happens there. Tonali is also someone who can take set pieces in the team, and I think, frankly, that's actually why he was bought in. A little bit of succession planning in terms of trying to replace Trippier at times when he's off the field and actually getting someone who's also still very good at set pieces. So maybe that can take away from Trippier. But for now, from the basis of what we saw last season, Trippier's still an incredible asset, and I think he's clearly an option that we want to think about in Game Week 5. But once again, like Shar, nothing to really think about in Game Week 1. And that's sort of the landscape of the defenders for now. Moving on to the goalkeepers cheat sheet. Now, we do have a landscape now where we have some 4.0 goalkeepers who could seriously play this season. Areola still hasn't taken that first place spot in the West Ham team, so he's not really a top pick. But he also might be someone who won't lose his position, I guess, over the season because he's already just the second place goalkeeper. As far as someone like Turner, he's moving to this Nottingham Forest team and he's likely going to be the first place goalkeeper. But we're also seeing in the news, particularly reported by Fabrizio Romano and also David Ornstein, that they're still looking for another keeper and they're looking for an extension of the Henderson loan from last season. So it's an odd situation where it seems like they still want two goalkeepers and maybe Turner won't necessarily lock down that position. And we might really not know until after Game Week 1. So we have to sort of make a decision by Game Week 1 with Turner or Areola. I'd probably think about Turner, particularly because there's a little bit of an interesting possibility there with, let's say, a Pickford rotation. As far as Areola, you can just pick him and just kind of hope for the best, hope that you finally get access to a West Ham defense eventually. But there's no real reason to sort of ignore either of the two options when you pick your 4.0 keepers. As far as Flecken, he is the best option now because Raya has left. Yes, of course, Flecken had some poor preseason games, but I mean, like I said in the previous goalkeepers cheat sheet, you're looking at a keeper for his body of work. Had a much better sort of outing in the last preseason game, and I would trust Brentford scouting more than our scouting over 3 games of football. So that's sort of my opinion on Flecken. I think Brentford have really good games, very good defense, also a defense that actually allows themselves to actually concede a lot of shots, but not necessarily high XG shots. So that kind of gives their goalkeepers an opportunity to kind of pepper themselves with easy saves, which is what happened with Raya last season. The question, of course, is whether Flecken is truly going to be, once again, a very, very good a very, very good shot stopper, because Raya actually was still good in terms of PSXG, which is like an advanced metric that looks at shot stopping quality. So that could be something to look at, whether Flecken is actually good at that. Historically, he has been good in the Bundesliga, but of course, we do like to apply the Bundesliga tax from time to time, and he could suffer from that. As far as Pickford, this is one of those situations where I think purely because the fixtures are so good, I would say Pickford has become quite a serious option in FPL. And the main reason, of course, is if you look towards, like, let's say game week 1 to 8, 7 and 8 particularly are very, very good fixtures for Pickford. He also rotates quite well with some other interesting keepers. If you're really kind of interested in a sort of rotating pair, I suppose Pickford and Turner could work, Pickford and also Steele could work. And that's sort of how I feel about Pickford. He made a lot of saves as well, was also a kind of positive shot stopper too. So one of the leading keepers in the league in terms of shot stopping. And that's going to be a huge plus, right? Even if he's coming back into a very weak defense on paper. As far as Johnston, opposite situation where I would say less saves per 90, as you can clearly see, but also a much better defense. I mean, 15 places effectively of difference. Johnson is, I would say, probably not going to be part of a top 4 defense once again, even though Crystal Palace have actually done this in back-to-back seasons. But he's looked good so far in the preseason. The only thing I would say is Crystal Palace do have some horrendous fixtures to start. So a question of Johnson is going to be when you really own him, I suppose, in the season, because eventually Crystal Palace will have a good run of games. Maybe it will actually line up with a wild card, and we can think about Johnston later. But for now, I think actually Pickford might just have the fixtures to edge it. If you think about, let's say, game weeks 1 to 8 specifically, which is a nice wild card window for game week 9. As far as Steele, I've put an asterisk around him, and I've put Verbruggen as well. It just feels very hard to invest yourself into Steele, particularly if he could lose his position a few weeks into the game. Now, you could argue that their best fixtures are actually game weeks 1 to 3, and you probably won't be wrong, but that's the issue. I mean, you don't really want to be investing into a 4.5 goalkeeper at the start of the season and then actually have to waste a transfer on them. You just want them to do well over a longer run of games, and that's sort of why I have more faith in the green picks here. And that's why, unfortunately, Steele, despite playing for such a great defense and actually having overall good fixtures, just doesn't appear as a best option for now. As far as Leno, he was a fantastic shot stopper last season. In fact, he had a record-breaking performance in terms of one-on-ones, how he handled those situations, and once again with the shot stopping, very, very high numbers here in terms of 3.94 per 90. So the highest in this list. Raya, of course, is a player who did well here, but he's been excluded. I would just say that this Fulham team didn't seem to really improve too much over the summer, and I am quite concerned of the level of defense. Ultimately, when you see their XGC very, very similar to a team like Everton, I'd say maybe you could argue that Sean Dyche with the preseason could catapult this Everton team, particularly if they have better fixtures to start compared to, let's say, a Leno in this early sort of game week 1 run. And so that's sort of the issue with Leno. I think the only sort of utility he might have is that he could rotate well with someone like Ederson, but that's outrageous, and that's 6 million sort of wasted almost. And yeah, I don't really see the value of Leno for now, but I think he could still be a pick that you can go for just to be a little bit differential. As far as 5.0, I have just gone for Onana. I think you could make an argument easily for Martinez, but for me, Onana has some really, really good home games over this sort of early run, and I think I'd prefer him as well. Some people have talked about the heroics, I suppose, of his baseline and what that would lead in terms of bonus points. I'm not 100% sold in terms of Onana being some sort of revolutionary goalkeeper. We have, of course, seen Ederson in the Premier League as well, and he's had great seasons, mostly off the back of really, really good clean sheets, like 16 to 20 clean sheets on average, as opposed to 11 last season. So that's sort of the landscape. And I would say with someone like Onana, who's going to be so much more integrated into Man United's style of play and how they actually organize themselves from the back, particularly to actually create goal-scoring opportunities like this Brighton team have last year and also City have in many, many years past, that's going to be a huge plus for the style of play of United. Whether that translates directly into FPL, I would say I don't have enough data at my hands to say that converts incredibly well. But the simple reality is United were still a fantastic defense last season, even though David De Gea wasn't a particularly good shot stopper. And the reality is David De Gea was a record-breaking shot stopper in the 17-18 season. But when you look at advanced metrics for shot stopping, even though he's shown up on a lot of highlight reels, he's also made a ton of mistakes. And actually, he hasn't done particularly great in terms of PSXG. So there is a good argument to also say that someone like De Gea is a little bit overrated for his shot stopping in the last few years, particularly when he dipped from his sort of athletic peak. And so Onana, I mean, doesn't have to do much to sort of match the level of last season where United were still the leading team in the league with clean sheets, despite, of course, just being an 8th place expected goals conceded team. I would say with Martinez being fit again, there's a huge benefit to the start of the season where you could see there was a bit of a drop off too when he actually left the team and was injured. As far as Ramsdale, huge asterisk there just because of the Raya transfer. I've just kept him there because the ownership for Ramsdale is incredibly high and just wanted to warn people that he's not really a pick that I would say is viable because Raya could easily displace him, maybe even as soon as game week 2. As far as Kepa, he's also dealing with a similar situation where I would say I'd much rather invest into the Chelsea defenders themselves as opposed to a goalkeeper like Kepa because he could lose his position in the team to Sanchez. The opening fixtures aren't particularly good for Kepa, so it's not like you just need to capitalize on some crazy upside. Yes, of course, game weeks 3, 4, and 5 are so good, but I mean, who knows? There could even be a small sliver of a chance that he could lose his position in the team, and that already sort of invalidates him as a pick for me. As far as 5.5 goalkeepers, I would have actually classed Ederson as the best goalkeeper until I actually recently read some news about how Sam Lee talked about how Guardiola has thought about maybe actually integrating Ortega into the first place starting position at times or actually rotating with Ederson. So that's a point of concern for sure that if you even think that there's a possibility over the course of the season that Ederson could be dropped at any odd time, that just calls into question whether you want to invest into Ederson at all, even though he is basically part of the last 5 years leading defense within the Premier League. So yes, last season is 100% anomaly. I personally think Ederson's a good pick. I know a lot of people have an emotional attachment to saying he's a terrible pick, but you just only have to look 2 years back to see Ederson being a good pick again. And that's sort of how I feel about Ederson. Ultimately, though, with the sort of doubt with the sort of Sam Lee tweet or the news, I'm not really interested in Ederson. I think we have some great 4.5 goalkeepers, and we can probably just do better with them. Similar situation with Allison, where their run of fixtures really start around sort of 7-8 onwards, and so there's no real reason to look at Allison, even though he was really, really good at shot stopping last season. And obviously for such a high quality defense in the past, it's kind of crazy to see how many saves per 90 Allison had to pull off last season. That just shows you how much Liverpool dropped off as a team, and you can see that too with the expected goals conceded. As far as someone like Pope, just someone to avoid because the fixtures are so poor, and you've got access to Botman at 4.5, so why even mess with Pope? And even Schär at 5.0. So that's sort of the landscape of the goalkeepers. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Let me know what your thoughts are in terms of both the defenders and the goalkeepers. Are you guys looking to go for some more intricate rotating patterns? Are you looking for some more tried and trusted options who are absolutely nailed on the team? Thank you guys so much for watching, and please like and subscribe. Hey everyone, just before you actually leave the video, I'd like to shout out my FPL podcast. It's a sort of analytics-based podcast looking at how we can use underlying data and also analytics to sort of improve our FPL experience, and how we can also use it as part of our sort of process in terms of decision-making week to week. So feel free to check it out. It's called the FPL Script, and have a good day.